Few films in the history of world cinema possess the weight, scope, and emotional precision of Edward Yang's A Brighter Summer Day. A masterwork of staggering depth and quiet devastation, it stands as one of the most defining achievements not only in Taiwanese cinema, but in the medium of film itself. At once intimate and epic, sprawling and meticulous, the film captures the turbulence of youth in the shadows of history, with a level of narrative ambition and formal control that remains unmatched. I watched A Brighter Summer Day for the first time several years ago, and when it was over, I knew I had just witnessed something beyond what I thought the medium I loved could accomplish. At the time, my praise for this work was extreme, but when looking back on it, I did not really understand how special this film truly is. To watch A Brighter Summer Day is to enter a fully realized past, not one constructed through spectacle or melodrama, but through lived-in spaces, shifting light, and the unspoken language of glances and silences. It is a large film at 4 hours long, yet not a moment feels excessive. Its dozens of characters each pulse with individuality. Every scene, every gesture, every corner of a hallway or reflected glint of sunlight carries emotional and historical weight. It is a film that breathes. Edward Yang's achievement is not merely technical, though his command of pacing, mise-en-scène, and ensemble storytelling is unmatched. What makes the film extraordinary is its human core, its patient, devastating portrait of a young boy's drift into violence and the crumbling social order that surrounds him. Rarely has a filmmaker captured adolescence with such aching clarity, or history with such emotional intimacy. A Brighter Summer Day is not only a film to be admired, it is a film to be lived with, studied, mourned, and returned to over and over and over again. It expands with each viewing, revealing new textures and resonances, like the slow unfurling of memory itself. In its complexity, its beauty, and its sorrow, it belongs among the greatest works of art ever made.
You're lonesome tonight. You know, someone said the world's a stage and each must play a part. Fate had me playing in love.
Set in the early 1960s Taiwan, A Brighter Summer Day draws inspiration from a real-life murder that occurred in Taipei in 1961. The story follows the tragic coming-of-age of a teenage boy named Zhao Xi, whose life gradually spirals into violence and alienation against the backdrop of political instability and cultural displacement. Xi is the son of mainland Chinese parents who, like many others, fled to Taiwan after the communist takeover of China. He lives with his family in a cramped military dependence village and attends a strict middle school where students are harshly disciplined and expected to conform. After being caught sneaking into the school at night, Xi is demoted to night school, where he finds himself increasingly drawn into the vital world of street gangs. Taipei is ruled unofficially by rival youth gangs, the Little Park Boys and the 217s, and Xi drifts toward their orbit, not out of a desire for crime, but as a way of seeking belonging and protection in a society that offers him little else. At the same time, he begins a hesitant but emotionally charged relationship with a girl named Ming, who was previously involved with Honey, the absent leader of the Little Park Boys. In Honey's place is the leader Sly. As tensions rise between the gangs, old friendships fray, and Ming becomes a contested figure, both idealized and silenced. Honey realizes that Sly is more respected than him and allows Xi to continue seeing Min before being killed by a rival gang leader. Xi becomes increasingly protective, possessive, and confused about Ming's loyalties. Meanwhile, his family life begins to collapse. His father is investigated by the secret police, and financial and emotional pressures mount at home. Xi's world narrows, and his growing sense of powerlessness begins to curl into paranoia and rage. The story builds, patiently and devastatingly, to a shocking climax. In a moment of desperation and betrayal, Xi murders Ming with a knife. The act is not portrayed as a dramatic twist, but as the tragic endpoint of a long and slow collapse, the result of societal pressures, emotional repression, and institutional failure. The film ends not with catharsis, but with silence and sorrow, as Xu is taken away, and those around him are left to reckon with the ruins of their lives.
I don't have plans and schemes, and I don't have hopes and dreams.
To grasp the full emotional and political force of Brighter Summer Days working with, one must begin with the wounds that shaped modern Taiwan. Wounds which the film never names outright, but which bleed through every scene. Though it is a deeply personal and grounded story, taking place in the lives of its teenage characters, Edward Yang's epic is also a political ghost story, haunted by a history of displacement, authoritarianism, and cultural fragmentation. The events of the film takes place in the early 1960s, during a volatile period of martial law imposed by the Kuomintang regime following its retreat to Taiwan in 1949. After losing the Chinese Civil War to Mao's Communist Party, the KMT fled to the island of Taiwan, bringing with them approximately 2 million mainland Chinese. This influx of mainlanders dramatically altered the social and ethnic composition of Taiwan, setting off decades of tension between the newcomers and the native Taiwanese. The KMT ruled with an iron grip, imposed strict military discipline, censored dissent, and clung to the dream of one day retaking the mainland, a fantasy that left the younger generation stranded in a present with no clear identity and a future that felt borrowed or stolen. This is the world A Brighter Summer Day takes place in. A society caught between cultures, between languages, between competing visions of what home looks like. The film's protagonist, Zhao Xu, is the son of mainland Chinese parent. The film's protagonist, Zhao Xu's parents, were mainland Chinese, and like many others lived in cramped military compounds and carried the burden of exile like an invisible weight. They are suspended between a lost past in China and an uncertain life in Taiwan, a life marked by suspicion, poverty, and bureaucratic fear. When Xu's father is summoned for a mysterious political interrogation, the humiliation and fear that follow are quietly devastating. No one explains why, no one can fight back. These are not isolated incidents. They are the environment the characters must always exist in. But Yang's treatment of this history is never overt. He allows politics to remain in the background, as is so often in life, while showing us its effects with startling clarity. The confusion and rage that fuels the film's youth gangs, for example, are not simply the products of general delinquency. They are the natural response of a generation born into a society where everything, from one's language to one's school uniform, is dictated by external powers, where the ruling government clings to Confucian ideals and mainland nostalgia, while American rock and roll floods the streets, where boys carry knives not only for protection, but to feel like they exist. The film's title, drawn from a misheard lyric in an Elvis Presley song, perfectly encapsulates the era's dissidence. Western culture arrives on the island in fragments, romanticized, misunderstood, and adopted as a way to escape. In the Taipei of A Brighter Summer Day, Elvis is not a liberator, he is a distant echo of a freedom that these teenagers can't quite access. They are not Americans, they are not fully Chinese, and they are not native Taiwanese. They are instead suspended, culturally adrift, emotionally volatile, and politically forgotten. Yang's genius lies in never overstating this. He simply shows it, in the way a father shrinks before a party official, or in the way a school teacher disciplines students with the dull repetition of moral slogans, or in the haunting silence that follows Zhao Xu's greatest mistake. In Taiwan, under martial law, violence doesn't explode, it simmers. Thus, A Brighter Summer Day does not use history as a backdrop, it breathes in it. The choices its characters make, the friendships they cling to, the violence they inflict, the fantasies they pursue are all shaped by a national trauma that remains unresolved. In telling the story of a single boy's fall from grace, Yang reveals a much larger truth: how the political becomes the personal, how exile reshapes identity, and how history carves itself into the hearts of those too young to understand it.
I love you. Why? 'Cause you love me. I think you're awfully sweet. Why? Because I love you. You say I'm your special treat.
At over 4 hours in length and populated by over 100 characters, A Brighter Summer Day is less a conventional narrative than a sprawling tapestry of interconnected lives, gestures, and silences. Yet, despite its daunting runtime and complex web of relationships, the film never feels unwieldy or overstuffed. On the contrary, Edward Yang crafts a structure of remarkable precision and emotional depth, one that mirrors the hazy logic of memory and the disjointed rhythms of adolescence. There is no single driving plot line in A Brighter Summer Day. The gang narrative that occupies the beginning part of the film does not stay forever, and the romance only builds over time. None of them exist as the focal point throughout the entire story. Instead, the film builds a narrative gradually, layering incidents, encounters, and seemingly minor moments into a cumulative emotional weight. Rather than follow the typical 3-act arc, Yang allows the story to drift organically, like time itself, stretching and compressing depending on what is remembered, what is repressed, and what is ultimately lost. Key events are not foreshadowed through melodramatic cues, but emerge as the logical outcome of an accumulation of quiet breakdowns, be it in family, friendship, or in identity. This fragmented structure serves not only as an aesthetic choice, but as a moral and psychological one. The film is deeply rooted in Yang's own memories of growing up in Taipei, and its temporal design reflects this subjective quality. We often don't realize the importance of a scene until much later, just as in life. The significance of a moment is often only understood in hindsight. The use of narrative gaps where events are skipped over, left ambiguous, furthers this sense of lived-in memory. Time does not flow evenly in the film. It pools and leaks, accelerates and stalls depending on the emotional gravity of a scene. Moreover, the film's refusal to highlight traditional turning points reflects Yang's deep trust in his viewers. He never underlines what to feel, never signals what to pay attention to. A moment of tremendous psychological importance may pass without musical cues or close-ups. Dialogue is often understated or interrupted. Scenes fade into the next without explanation. And yet the result is not confusion, but immersion. The viewer learns how to watch the film by living inside of its rhythms, by surrendering to its temporality. This structured patience allows Yang to render a world in which every character has weight. Every subplot speaks to a larger societal fabric. Minor characters are given time to breathe. Background moments become emotionally important. These details do not serve a plot, but they do serve the larger world. Another distinctive feature of the film's narrative flow is its refusal to privilege the protagonist's point of view exclusively. While Xiao Shi anchors the film, we are often pulled away from him to observe other figures: his parents, his friends, gang leaders, and school authorities. This gives the story a democratic feel. Every character is caught in the same web of societal pressures, political anxiety, and adolescent confusion. We feel the claustrophobia, not just of Shi's fate, but of the entire generation's arrested possibilities. The passage of time in A Brighter Summer Day is also subtly marked by shifts in mood and atmosphere rather than overt timestamps. We move through the months almost imperceptibly. School terms change, seasons pass, relationships evolve, but without much fanfare. This mirrors the slow erosion of adolescence that defines the film. The summer does not end with a storm, but with a quiet dimming of the light. By constructing the film as a series of seemingly disconnected but emotionally charged fragments, Edward Yang captures the very essence of how youth is experienced and remembered. A Brighter Summer Day unfolds like a dream half recalled, with moments of piercing clarity emerging from an enveloping fog. It is a film not only about memory, but made in the shape of memory. Its structure is not linear, but gravitational. What emerges from this narrative architecture is a world both expansive and intimate, historical and personal, political and heartbreakingly human. The slow build is not just a formal strategy, it is a philosophical one. In the world Yang depicts, tragedy is never sudden. It is the patient accumulation of neglect, silence, fear, and longing. And only in a structure vast and delicate enough to hold all of those can a tragedy be told and understood.
Is your heart filled with pain? Shall I come back again? Tell me, dear, are you lonesome tonight?
At the heart of A Brighter Summer Day lies a profound exploration of adolescence, not as a brief universal rite of passage, but as a turbulent collision between identity and circumstance, where violence becomes both a language and a symptom. The film's young characters are not simply misguided youth, they are children stranded in a world that offers no moral clarity, no cultural stability, and no meaningful sense of belonging. Within this limbo, violence does not erupt. It seeps in, silently and inexorably. Zhao Xue, the central figure of the film, embodies this slow descent. At the beginning, he appears thoughtful, observant, perhaps a little withdrawn, neither a rebel nor a conformist, just a boy trying to find his footing. But as the film progresses, we watch him absorb the ambient tensions of the world around him. The rigidity of school discipline, the collapse of his family's security, the pressure to perform masculinity, and the confusion of his first love. What unfolds is not a transformation so much as a wearing down, the gradual erosion of moral certainty in a world where nothing is certain. The street gangs that dominate Shu's environment are not cartoonish delinquents or symbols of urban decay. They are social organisms formed out of need. They offer the illusion of community, structure, and power, everything that families and institutions fail to provide for Shu. The rivalry between the Little Park Boys and the 217s is as much a performance of identity as it is a contrast. The rivalry between the Little Park Boys and the 217s is as much a performance of identity as it is a context of strength. These groups, the boys attempt to define themselves. Through these groups, the boys attempt to define themselves, to mark territory, to create order in a society where the adults have long since lost control. Yet the violence these boys enact with knives, bricks, bats, and words is never glorified. It is mundane, clumsy, almost inevitable. The film does not aestheticize brutality, it reveals its origins. For many of these boys, including Shu, violence becomes a means for being seen and recognized. In a system that ignores or punishes them, they learn to express themselves through domination or self-destruction. It is telling that Shu does not begin as a gang member. He is drawn in slowly by association, by proximity, by love and jealousy and fear. When he ultimately commits murder, it is not out of rage or cruelty, but desperation. a cry for clarity in a world that offers none. Beneath all this lies a question that defines the film. What does it mean to become someone in a society that denies you the space to grow? The characters of A Brighter Summer Day are not merely confused, they are trapped between political ideologies, cultural identities, and broken institutions. The school demands obedience but provides no wisdom. The family teaches survival but not affection. The gangs offer hierarchy without any future, and popular culture, especially American rock and roll and Western films, dangles fantasies of freedom that have no real application in their Taiwanese reality. This fractured world produces fractured identities. Shu's very sense of self begins to dissolve. He speaks less and less as the film progresses. His face grows harder, his posture more defensive. When he kills Ming, it is not an act of empowerment, but of annihilation. Of her, of himself, of the fantasy that love or violence could save him from this existential drift. Yang does not judge his young characters, he mourns them. He observes them with an unsentimental but deeply empathetic gaze. He recognizes that their failures are not personal but structural, the logical outcomes of a generation raised in the long shadow of exile, authoritarianism, and cultural dislocation. In A Brighter Summer Day, youth is not simply the time before adulthood. It is a battlefield where identity itself is constantly under siege. And in this battlefield, violence is not the exception. It is the grammar of a broken world. If the streets and schools of A Brighter Summer Day represent the visible arenas of conflict and chaos, then the family home is where the quieter, more insidious fractures lie. Edward Yang's vision of family is not one of refuge, but of rupture, a space that echoes with fear, silence, and the slow collapse of generational trust. In the film, familiar bonds are not strong enough to protect children from the outside world, because the outside world has already seeped into the home, and the parents themselves are casualties of history. The most vivid example of this is Zhao Shu's family, whose domestic life is marked by a quiet kind of subdued despair. His father, a civil servant and former KMT bureaucrat, embodies the traumas of political exile and bureaucratic fear. Once a man of ideals, he now moves with caution, his body language that of someone always bracing for consequences. When he is summoned by the secret police for a vague investigation, his quiet shame is overwhelming. He does not protest, he does not explain. He simply returns home, physically intact but spiritually diminished. The interrogation scene, understated but harrowing, captures the emotional climate of Taiwan under martial law. Not overt terror, but a constant atmosphere of surveillance and submission. This paternal erosion has consequences. Shu watches his father shrink under pressure, sees his fear of authority, his helplessness in the face of injustice. The moral center that a father might represent in a more stable world has been hollowed out. There is no guidance for Shu, only rules, punishments, and vague disappointments. The absence of emotional intimacy is not dramatized through shouting matches or abuse. It is something far sadder, a daily destruction of connection. There are scenes where father and son are in the same room, but speaking entirely past one another, both too exhausted or ashamed to reach across the silence. Shu's mother, too, is a figure marked by quiet despair. She worries about money, about appearances, about the family's reputation, but she, like many women of her generation, is locked into a role where worry substitutes for genuine power. She has no access to the world that is unraveling around her sons. She exists largely on the margins of the film's narrative, which is not a flaw in Yang's storytelling, but a reflection of the gendered limitations imposed by society he depicts. The domestic sphere becomes a holding pen, not a place of nurture but of delay, where crises are postponed but never resolved. The siblings likewise are adrift. Shu's older brother is entangled in his own uncertainties. His younger sister offers brief moments of warmth, but even those are fleeting. The family functions less like a unit and more like a collection of individuals quietly weathering their own private storms. There are no real family dinners where feelings are shared, no scenes of meaningful reconciliation. What we see instead is a family trapped in parallel isolation, each member trying to survive a country and culture that no longer recognizes them. What makes Yang's depiction of family so devastating is that it never tips into melodrama. The pain is ambient, the failures are human. These are not abusive or monstrous parents, these are not abusive or monstrous children. They're broken people trying their best with nothing to draw upon but their own fears and fading memories. The emotional gap between generations is not caused by arrogance or rebellion, but by historical dislocation. The parents belong to a China that no longer exists. The children are growing up in a Taiwan that has no clear identity. Between them lies a silence that no one knows how to cross. In this way, the collapse of the family mirrors the collapse of the broader societal order. The institutions that are supposed to provide structure, government, school, family, all prove insufficient. They issue rules, but offer no clarity. They demand loyalty, but give no protection. Xu's descent into violence is not a rebellion against its family. It is a consequence of the emotional vacancy within it. In a world where parents are ashamed, silenced, or absent, children must invent their own codes. And those codes, in this film, inevitably turn toward violence. In A Brighter Summer Day, family is not the origin of violence, but it cannot prevent it either. It is not the cause of tragedy, but it cannot catch the child as he falls. Yang offers no easy solutions to Xu's situation. There is no return to domestic harmony for Xu, no restoration of lost innocence. The family, like the nation, like Xu, is broken beyond repair. Ming occupies a complex and often misunderstood role within A Brighter Summer Day. Far from being a mere tragic love interest or a passive object of desire, she is a young woman navigating the same fractured and volatile world as the boys around her, only with even fewer advantages for agency or self-definition. Ming's character is marked by ambiguity and subtlety, reflecting the contradictory pressures placed on girls in a society caught between tradition and modernity. Throughout the film, Ming is idealized, scrutinized, and used as a symbol for the boys who orbit her. To the rival gangs, she is less a person than a marker of status and allegiance. Her loyalties, real or perceived, become a source of tension and conflict, making her a focal point of jealousy and suspicion. Yet despite the weight of these expectations, Ming remains largely unknowable, resisting the simplistic narratives imposed on her. Throughout the film, Ming has relationships with three characters, Honey, Sly, and Xiao Xu. While others take offense at her jumping from boy to boy, Xu is the only one to take action because of it, leading to Ming's death. Yang does not lend Xu any ground for his defense. Ming is fully presented as a victim, and while her lack of communication was a problem, it in no way justifies Xu's actions. Her death is not caused by her relationships, but by a comment she makes when Xu confronts her.
我跟别人一样，看错你了。你原来跟那些人都一样，对我好，就是想要跟我交换我对你的感情。
This is the moment that breaks Xiao Xu. All his trying to protect Ming, all his trying to escape crime and look for something better in this community, this comment breaks all of that. So he lashes out in anger and immediately, heartbreakingly regrets it. Edward Yang presents Ming not as a caricature or a stereotype, but as a quietly complex figure whose presence highlights the limited options available to young women in the film's world. She moves through the story with a reserved nature that borders on inscrutability, and her true feelings and motivations are often left unclear, both to the other characters and to the audience. This deliberate ambiguity underscores how girls like Ming are often invisible or misunderstood in their own right, and even to themselves, simultaneously desired and blamed for being desired, scrutinized and dismissed. Ming's tragic fate, the murder that becomes the film's heartbreaking climax, is not just a personal loss, but a symbol of the broader vulnerabilities faced by young women in a culture riddled with violence, patriarchal control, and political upheaval. She is caught in the crossfires of boyish allegiances and a societal order that refuses to protect or recognize her autonomy. Her death serves as a stark reminder of how these intersecting forces silence and erase female voices and experiences. In Ming, A Brighter Summer Day offers a powerful, if understated, meditation on the fragility of female identity within a fractured society. Her elusive presence challenges the viewers to look beyond the surface of youth and violence, to consider the quiet struggles of those who, like her, inhabit the margins of history.
There'll never be anyone else but you for me. Never ever be, just couldn't be anyone else but you.
A Brighter Summer Day is not simply a narrative triumph. It is also a staggering formal achievement. Every frame, every shadow, every off-screen silence contributes to the atmosphere of creeping dread and suspended adolescence that defines the film. Rather than direct the viewer's attention with empathetic editing or musical cues, Yang builds his aesthetic around restraint, patience, and spatial complexity. The result is a visual language as richly textured and emotionally immersive as the story itself. Edward Yang's films are some of the best shot movies of all time. Yang's understanding of color and framing are among the best in history, and are on full display in films such as Yi Yi and Taipei Story. But A Brighter Summer Day is his masterwork, and in my opinion, it is possibly the best shot film of all time. Perhaps the most striking aspect of the film's aesthetic is its use of lighting and shadows. Much of the film takes place at night or in dimly lit interiors. Flashlights, bare bulbs, candles, and distant neon signs are often provide the only illumination. These sources are not symbolic, they are practical, but they take on symbolic power through their repetition. The film is shot in long, unbroken takes that emphasize spatial relationships over emotional close-ups. The distance, sometimes literal, sometimes emotional, encourages the viewer to explore the frame, to notice background movement, to observe how characters occupy space in relation to one another. Many key scenes unfold in medium or long shots, with multiple figures arranged in layers, often divided by windows, doors, or corridors. This deep focus staging reflects the layered social reality of the film, where every individual is caught in a web of interpersonal and political forces beyond their full comprehension. Rather than manipulating the audience with camera movement, Yang allows his compositions to speak for themselves. In this way, stillness becomes expressive. A shot may hold long after a character has left the frame, emphasizing their absence. Or it may begin before a character enters, establishing the room, the domestic space, the alleyway, the classroom, as a character in of itself. These spaces do not merely house the action, they shape it. They are haunted by previous conversations, past decisions, and future consequences. Time accumulates in these rooms like dust. The film's sound design is similarly understated. There is no traditional musical score. Instead, we hear ambient noises, cicadas, traffic, footsteps, distant radios, the buzz of fluorescent lights. This naturalistic soundscape enhances the film's documentary-like realism, while also creating emotional dissonance. The absence of musical cues forces the viewers to sit with discomfort and to find meaning in silence. When music does appear, whether it's Elvis, Taiwanese pop, or a live student performance, it arrives as intrusion or escape, not really ever as comfort. Color too plays a quiet but potent role. Yang favors muted earth tone palettes, browns, grays, washed out greens that evoke a world worn thin by time. School uniforms, walls, and alleyways all blend into a visual sameness, reinforcing the sense of societal conformity, emotional suppression, and also the idea that everything in this world is old. It's aged, it's weathered. In contrast, rare moments of color, Ming's lipstick, a red dress, a painted prop in the theater, stand out with emotional sharpness, often representing fleeting beauty, unattainable desire, or impending doom. Yang also avoids traditional editing rhythms. Scenes end not with dramatic beats, but with slow and disconnected sighs. Conversations trail off, interrupted by silence or distraction. Transitions are often abrupt or understated, with no musical bridges or fade-outs. This contributes to the film's non-linear emotional rhythm. We feel time passing, but unevenly, as if drifting through memories rather than watching events unfold in a neatly framed story. The culminative effect of these choices is that A Brighter Summer Day does not look like most coming-of-age films, nor does it feel like a conventional crime story. It feels more like a history, remembered in fragments. Emotionally resonant, but narratively elusive, tactile, but ethereal. Yang constructs a form that reflects his film's very themes: the instability of identity, the unreliability of memory, the way history is lived in the body even when it is not spoken aloud. In resisting sentimentality or spectacle, Yang creates an aesthetic of quiet devastation. A Brighter Summer Day is beautiful, but it is never pretty. Its images linger not because they are dramatic, but because they are so deeply recognizably human.
Every devil eyes, she'd hold me close and kiss me, but her heart was full of lies, poor little fool. Oh yeah, I was a fool.
A Brighter Summer Day exists in a forgotten time. Beneath its surface, its street fights and schoolyards, its teenage romances and family tensions, Edward Yang's masterpiece is, above all, a meditation on memory, its fragility, its burden, and its refusal to fade. The film does not simply remember the past, it mourns how little of the past survives in the present, and how deeply it shapes the people who don't even know they are carrying it. Although the film is rooted in a specific historical moment, Taiwan in the early 1960s, Yang deliberately avoids anchoring his story in overt exposition. There are no historical footnotes, no on-screen text, no political lectures. Instead, history seeps in through tone, gesture, atmosphere. It appears in a way a father hesitates before speaking, or in an offhand comment about interrogations, disappearances, and exile. The political is felt, not declared, and yet it is still everywhere. This is a cultural space haunted by displacement, and the film's characters, especially the adults, are shattered by a homeland they can no longer return to. The parents in A Brighter Summer Day carry with them the trauma of civil war, forced migration, and lost ideals. They raise their children in a country they do not understand, under a regime that demands loyalty to a mythic mainland China. These children, in turn, are cut off from that past, but not free of it. They inherit its silence, its paranoia, and its fear, and they carry it without knowing its full shape. What Yang captures so devastatingly is that the past, when buried, does not disappear, it becomes unconscious. It resurfaces in fractured ways, in behavior, in miscommunication, in violence. Shu and his peers are not just teenagers navigating adolescence, they are the first generation to grow up in exile, raised by parents whose own identities were disrupted by war, whose values are out of sync with their new reality, and who can offer neither explanation nor escape. In this way, the film becomes a portrait of a society haunted not only by its own history, but by fantasies it cannot fulfill. The young are caught between worlds, the silence of their parents, the discipline of their schools, the seduction of foreign images. There is no stable identity to inhabit, only fractures of discarded selves. The result is a generation that is spiritually unmoored, struggling to define themselves in the absence of cultural coherence. The film's structure, as discussed earlier, reflects this haunted quality. Its storytelling and slow accumulation of detail mimic the way memory functions, partial, distorted, emotionally potent. There are scenes that linger long after they end, characters who vanish without resolution, conversations that trail off into silence. Yang is not reconstructing the past, he is invoking it, making it present not through facts, but through mood, space, and unresolved emotion. This emphasis on emotional history rather than factual history is one of the film's greatest achievements. In A Brighter Summer Day, the past is not a distant object of study, it is a force that lives inside of people, in their habits, their hesitations, their heartbreaks. And for Yang, to remember the past is not merely to recall what happened, but to reckon with the legacy it leaves behind. His film becomes an act of cinematic remembrance, not explaining history, but feeling it, to give shape to its lingering traces. In doing so, Yang resists the erasure so common in official narratives. The Taiwan of the 1960s, especially under martial law, was a place of suppressed memory, where speaking about politics, identity, or loss could carry severe consequences. A Brighter Summer Day, on its scale and quiet defiance, becomes a form of resistance, a testimony to what was forgotten, ignored, or deliberately silenced. It reclaims the personal as political, the domestic as historical, the adolescent as tragic witness. By the end of the film, nothing has been resolved. Ming is dead, Shi is in custody, the summer has passed, but no one has grown, just as how the society cannot grow in its current stagnation. And yet, through this act of remembrance, Yang offers a kind of grace. Not hope, but a form of clarity. The film does not rescue the past, but it refuses to let it be buried. And in doing so, it honors the lives caught in its shadows, not as symbols, but as people.
But honey, nothing can ever change this love I have for you.
In most stories of adolescence, tragedy arrives with a lesson. Violence is followed by resolution, trauma by healing, and the narrative folds itself into meaning. But A Brighter Summer Day offers no such comforts. Its climactic murder, the sudden, shocking act in which Zhao Shi kills Ming, does not arrive with operatic finality. There is no orchestral swell, no grand revelation. There's only silence, stillness, and the unnerving feeling that this ending was not an accident. The tragedy in A Brighter Summer Day is not merely that a girl is murdered. It is that everything that might have prevented her death had already failed long before the knife was drawn. Family, school, the state, friendship, even love, all the structures that should offer meaning and stability have been hollowed out by fear, dislocation, and repression. The murder is not an interruption of normalcy. It is the quiet realization of what has been broken from the very beginning. And Yang does not dramatize this for effect. The murder is not staged as a climax, but as a continuation. The narrative structure does not change after the murder takes place. It continues. It happens in a few seconds in an open space. There is no slow motion, no music, no attempt to imbue the act with cinematic gravity. In its emotional flatness, it becomes more devastating. It is not filmed as a moment of significance, but as a scene already weighted down with the cumulative failure of everything that led up to it. What follows is even more telling. There's no redemption arc. Shu does not confess in tears, nor is there a trial scene to deliver justice. His family barely reacts. His friends drift away. There is no one to offer a clear moral reading of what just happened. The camera does not search for a lesson. It observes the emotional vacuum left in the aftermath. This is what makes A Brighter Summer Day so difficult, so unforgettable. It offers tragedy without any catharsis. The refusal of emotional release is not a flaw or an oversight. It is a philosophical and moral stance. Yang is not interested in resolving pain, but in revealing its depth. In the world of the film, there are almost no bad guys, no singular villains to blame. Everything is wounded, everyone is afraid. The boy who kills is also the boy who is lost, unheard, and abandoned. The girl who dies is also the girl who's been objectified, silenced, idealized, and misunderstood. The film's power is its refusal to reduce its characters to symbols. This tragic sensibility, clear-eyed, unrelenting, extends to the very structure of the movie. There are no neat endings. Threads are left unresolved. Characters vanish. The seasons change, the light shifts, the final scenes drift into stillness, echoing not with climax, but with the silence of aftermath. If the film has a message, it is probably this: that there are no clean conclusions to be drawn from broken worlds. There was only the long, quiet reckoning that follows. And yet, for all its refusal of catharsis, the film is not cruel. It does not exploit its characters' suffering, it mourns them. In the way that Yang's camera lingers on an empty room after a confrontation, or follows Shu in silence after his act, there is a profound empathy. Not for what his characters do, but for what they endure. A Brighter Summer Day allows tragedy in its full complexity, without apology or simplification, and in doing so, it honors the real histories and emotional realities that often go underrepresented. In this way, Yang's masterpiece brings not In this way, Yang's masterpiece belongs not to the tradition of tidy morality tales, but to the lineage of unflinching humanist cinema where pain is not sanitized and resolution not guaranteed. Like the films of Ozu, Bresson, or Tarkovsky, A Brighter Summer Day is built around absence, failure, and the quiet gravity of time. Its tragedy lies not in the act itself, but in the long, invisible collapse that made it possible, and in the knowledge that the world afterward will simply go on.
Does your memory stray to a brighter summer day when I kissed you and called you sweetheart?
A Brighter Summer Day is not merely an excellent film. It is one of the foundational works of modern cinema. A slow-burning epic that expands our understanding of what film can hold, express, and preserve. Over 30 years after its release, it has not faded. On the contrary, its gravity has only increased. It speaks with uncanny precision to a world fractured by authority and cultural uncertainty. A world that continues to define lives across generations and continents. What Edward Yang created was not just a portrait of a particular time and place, but a deep, resonant elegy for the loss of innocence in all its forms. That it was almost lost to obscurity, poorly distributed, difficult to access, too long for most casual viewers, only intensifies its mythic status. Its eventual restoration and recognition have elevated it to the heights of global cinema, where it belongs beside the epics of Kurosawa, Visconti, and Bergman. Yet Yang's voice remains unique. He was not intimidated by any tradition. He was carving out a new one, a cinema that could contain personal memory, political trauma, adolescence, and ideology, the intimate and the epic, all within the same breath. The film's emotional effect is incredible, even in retrospect. Long after the final frame disappears, its characters linger in the viewer's mind, not as fictional constructs, but as people who were once known. One remembers the quiet glances and the nervous shuffles of boys. The radio playing songs that no longer sound joyful. One remembers the stillness after the knife. One remembers how long it takes for a child to become lost.